consider when you're launching a campaign, and from what product design, where you want to make your product available to, what markets you want to make it available to, what shipping strategy you want to have. Those are things that you really want to start thinking about at the start of your campaign, or even when you're thinking about launching a campaign, just to make sure that the campaign runs smoothly.
So we're going to hop off here on the next point, which would be kind of when you're post manufacturing. So some of the things you need to think of in regards to like importing and exporting your products once you're done with your manufacturing, you do need to consider that you need to bulk ship your items to a fulfillment center, which might be even your own garage, depending what how you're going to go about shipping your own stuff. So in terms of like getting a customs broker and getting a freight, LTL, there's a lot of different options for getting it to the warehouse where you're going to be doing your shipping. From that point, you're going to be shipping to individual customers. So that also means that whether you're doing it yourself or using a third-party provider, you're going to need to provide tracking and shipping notifications to your customers. And if you're shipping internationally, which we'll get into later, we'll get more depth on that later, you need to account for duties and taxes and returns.
As far as fulfilling your project, I mean, obviously there are different ways that you can do it. You can obviously fulfill the campaign yourself. Have your product shipped by your manufacturer to your own facility, your home, and pick, pack, and ship the orders yourself. Typically, that do it yourself is for smaller campaigns where you don't have thousands of orders that you have to ship out, and you don't need a whole bunch of space to store your products. You also can do maybe a mixed method where you are using a third-party provider to ship some of your orders, and you have your orders that you want to fulfill yourself. I want to give you an example of that. I worked with a campaigner. The gentleman was based in Israel. Products were manufactured in China. And what we did is that we received their inventory in our facility in China. And they had, I believe, for this particular scenario, they had about 11,000 orders, of which I think like 300 were for campaign backers in Israel. So they told us, hey, our campaign is Israel. We want to deliver to them ourselves, and we basically, what we did for them is we assembled the orders for them in China, but rather than putting a shipping label on it, we just palletized those orders and shipped it to them in Israel by the way of ocean, and then they did the last mile delivery. So there are different reasons why you might want to do this. Another example would be, for example, let's say if you are based in, let's say in Europe, and let's say you're in France, and you have few hundred orders that are for campaigns in France, and you want to maybe do something unique because of people from your own home country have supported your campaign. So there are different reasons why people would want to do this, and obviously that's a definite option. And then the third way would be to have a full service provider that's going to do A to Z for you, from receiving all the products and picking and packing and shipping out the orders to the backers. And there's different ways that can be done, and we can obviously in the QA section we can go a little bit more in detail as far as some of the different options that we have available as a full service partner, and how we can get your orders fulfilled and get it to the hands of your backers. If I was going to break it down as far as the infrastructure that's you need to think about when you're looking at either of these three different methods. You obviously need to be able to have a way to manage your orders, manage the surveys, I know there's different platforms out there that can help you with that, but that's definitely something that you want to consider as far as how you, especially if you have a, you have a very successful campaign and you get thousands and thousands of orders, you definitely would want to consider the different order management platforms and partners that you can partner with to manage the different aspects that is involved with managing your orders. If you are considering maybe doing a combination of do it yourself or do it yourself and using a partner, you want to look at the different shipping softwares. If you want to generate labels yourself, obviously, it would help to have a shipping software figured out so that you can generate those labels. And then as far as third-party logistics providers, you want to look at what they offer you as far as support and a third-party provider. There's different ways to go about it. You can have a third-party provider that has multiple locations that can service your backers, or somebody that can service them from a central hub. So there are different things that you do have to consider when you're looking at fulfillment of your campaign.
So on this slide, we kind of break down, like where you should, like at what level should you be considering which method to use. Like we were saying, do it yourself. You got like less than 1,000 orders, you can pick and pack out of your garage. Maybe you have a smaller product, something like that. Mixed method, 3,000 plus backers. Potentially, you might, bring the US, if you live in the US, or like Reza's example in Israel, and you handle like orders within your own country, but you let a 3PL handle your international orders. And then, like we've been saying, the full service, you got 10,000 plus orders. It's way more than you can handle by yourself. You can consider using a 3PL to completely manage your campaign at that point. And then, it's different for everybody. These are all just guidelines. Like, you don't need exactly 3,000 orders sometimes to consider a mixed method, or to completely avoid going completely full service. Sometimes bulky products, you can have 2,000, 40-pound packages that need to go out, and that's not necessarily something that you can do out of your garage as well. So it's whatever works best for you.
Andrew, I want to spend a little bit of time to talk about when you should start thinking about fulfillment. I'm hoping to put context into it by giving you some examples. I was working with a client, and they had a product that was basically a stick figure that was used for I think it's called motion stop animation, and beautiful product. And basically the product had a stage that would open up, and it would end up being like 2-3 feet wide, and you could fold it up, and it would be like a couple of feet high, and that was actually, that wasn't the main product, but that was something that as a stretch goal they offered to all their backers. So now then what happened is that when they were going through the design process for this, they didn't consider what it would take to ship it. So rather than making this stage into multiple pieces so that it could be folded up and ship in a smaller package, it was basically something that at the minimum was about 1.5 feet long. So now keep having that, and also including the stick figure in the shipment. That it was shipping a box that was large, and basically what that meant is that it limited what carriers were available, because some carriers have dimensional restrictions as far as what sizes they're willing to ship, and then for those carriers that are willing to ship larger size products, they have a thing is called the dimensional weight. Basically the larger your product is, the heavier is considered, even if the weight hasn't increased. So the higher the shipping cost. So that's a really good example as far as what is something that that it should be considered during the design stage of your product. So packaging, and if I may just touch on one more item, and this is something that's really relevant because applies to a lot of product nowadays, and that's batteries. If you are going to have a product that is powered by battery, you really need to consider your battery type, and also do investigation as far as what are the shipping restrictions. I'd like to kind of close this up by giving an example. Worked with another client, and their main product wasn't a battery. It was actually outdoors gear, but they included with their product, with their shipment as a stretch goal again, a solar powered power bank. And this was in 2017. We started talking to them, and there weren't that many shipping restrictions then. But then 2018 came around, and carriers implemented a whole bunch of restrictions on shipping lithium batteries, and basically that really limited the carrier that we had available, and that particular carrier that was willing to ship orders with this power bank inside it would charge an additional $75 surcharge just because this shipment had a battery. And so if you are planning on putting together a product, or if you have a product that has batteries in it, you really want to look into what are the restrictions as far as shipping, and also countries. Like, for example, Italy doesn't allow any parcel shipments with lithium-ion batteries going to that country. So if you have something, you ship a power bank to Italy, it's going to get stuck in customs. So those are a lot of things that you want to consider that kind of not only determines shipping regulations, but also what markets you open up your campaign to.
Yeah, so with everything that we've just been talking about, the batteries, the packaging, these are all common cost things for campaigners. Packaging, insurance, behind-the-scene expansion, international shipping regulation, customs fees. Currently working with someone who had declared the value of their product higher than it actually was, which has led to stuff being delivered in the EU, and customs, they're being asked to pay higher duties than they actually should, which is leading to backers that are upset with these costs that weren't communicated up front. So all in all, this just ends up costing them more. And like the last point on here, time, it's costing a lot of time sink for them now too, because you end up doing a lot of the customer service management on the back end yourself as well. And all these costs add up. So the next 3 slides touch on packaging. So like Reza was mentioning, dimensional weight and all this other thing, there's a lot to consider here with packaging. You got to consider your size and how it looks. This is in your base product packaging. The protection, if you're not using your manufacturer to, pre-pack your products, it's very unlikely that you're going to have a box size that, fits your product optimally. So you will be using stuff like void fill, whether that's, packing peanuts, or traditionally it's air-filled plastic bubbles. You need to make sure that depending on the fragility of your product, that it's protected well. So like we've been saying, you want to make sure you're using materials that protect your products. Are you sending over parts or fully assembled products? So you need to consider the manufacturing cost there as well, whether you're having your manufacturer, package everything for you and stuff.
Hi, we're having some technical difficulties, but Reza will be right back. Reza and Andrew.
Back?
Yep.
All right, great. So just getting back into the manufacturers, whether or not you're sometimes it's better to have your product pre-packaged at the manufacturer, so we can just bring it into like a 3PL warehouse, or you could bring it in your garage. You could slap a label on it and send it out. You know, sometimes that's a lot better than, you know, if the warehouse has to put stuff together for you, there's still costs there too. And sometimes those are some of the unseen costs that they're very hard to quantify early. You don't know how long it's going to take someone, what rate they're going to bill you, and all these other things. So lessons learned about packaging. The box is very important. Dimensional weight, like Reza was mentioning earlier, can really affect how much it costs to ship your product. Making sure that you find the right box that will protect your product can be challenging, especially when you're shipping some of these things internationally. They go a long way. And then think about shipping during your product design stages, like Reza's story with the animation, stop motion stuff. You know, it ended up being very costly with a large packaging. If you don't take dimensional weight or total weight, some carriers are ridiculously cheap, especially if you're shipping internationally. Something like Hong Kong Post, they have a weight limit of 2 kilograms, which is about 4.4 pounds. So if you develop something that's 5 pounds, you won't be able to use, you know, very inexpensive carriers, and those costs can just all add up. Take it on.
Sure. Yeah. So to add on, another thing you want to consider is shipping insurance. To piggyback on the Hong Kong Post story that Andrew was saying, you know, our solution, we ship a lot of orders directly from our Shenzhen facility in China, and Hong Kong Post is one of the carriers that we use. It's one of the lowest cost carriers that's available out of China. It's to Andrew's point, it's designed for it's meant for lower weight shipments. It's not an insured carrier. So when you want to calculate your shipping costs and how much you're gonna tell your backers as far as how much the shipping cost is, you want to consider, okay, do I want to ship with an insured carrier, somebody like DHL, or do I want to ship with, do I want to go with the lowest cost carrier, and what that means? So, you know, one of the things is that, okay, what is the cost of your product? You want to consider that if it's, for example, if you're shipping a $20 product, it might make sense to just go with the lower cost carrier, because, you know, if the package gets lost, you can just send a replacement unit, versus if you have a $1,000 unit, then you definitely want to ship with a more premium carrier, just because, you know, you have that insurance aspect. So if the package gets lost or damaged, you can at least claim insurance. So, you know, that's another thing to consider when you're calculating insurance costs. We run into this all the time, where campaign's finished, and then that's when, you know, a campaigner starts talking to us, and we realize that they didn't account for all these different costs when they were charging for especially when it comes to international orders. And, you know, it ends up being a lot more costly if they had started thinking about this early on. So cost considerations, just to recap, you know, you want to look at the weight versus dimensional weight, the different methods of shipping. If you want to do it yourself, you want to do a combination of partner and do it yourself. You know, the number of orders, you know, that should kind of be a good guideline as far as what method you go by. Considering the cost of shipments, and also another thing that, you know, we haven't touched on yet is refusals and returns. With crowdfunding campaigns, there isn't really any returns. It's mainly refusals, and the main reason that I've seen refusals, there are two main reasons why there's a refusal. A refusal basically means that the carrier was either unable to make the delivery of the package, or the carrier attempted to make delivery and the recipient refused. Now, the main reason why recipients typically refuse packages is because of duties and taxes. So going back to when you launch your campaign, you definitely want to make sure that you discuss with your backers that there's going to be duties and taxes for international shipments, and it's up to you to determine what is considered an international shipment based on what method you choose to deliver the order. And typically, the duties and taxes are calculated based on the total, the retail value of the product plus the shipping cost, and it's a percentage thereof. I have another story for you guys. Again, this was a client that shipped suitcases, and the suitcases were shipped from China. We shipped, and in Israel, the suitcase was around $400. It was a bulky product, so I think it was like $50-$60 to ship it. But when it got to Israel, the duties and taxes were like something like 200%. So, and you know, for that particular product, there was a high level of duties and taxes on the product. So, again, this goes back into not only making your backers aware that there's going to be duties and taxes, but also, you know, if you're going to open your campaign to the entire world, you might want to do a little bit of research to determine, okay, what are the duties and taxes that are going to be applied to my product if I open my campaign to people in, for example, South Africa. And kind of this ties into when you're launching your campaign, you really do want to limit how many what regions you open up your campaign to. You may give you an example. We have a lot of problems with shipping orders to Russia. That we just get a lot of lost packages, and you know, people that have opened their campaign to the Russian market maybe sold 10 or 20 more orders, but they end up spending a whole bunch of time and resources on trying to resolve these packages that are either stuck in customs or packages that are lost, and backers are saying we never received our package. So you really want to consider, you know, perhaps limiting the market as far as what countries you open up your campaign to. You might maybe have a few less orders, but you end up saving yourself a lot of heartache at the end.
Yes, so we mentioned it earlier, but some of these behind-the-scene costs, to get into those, these are some things that sometimes you can help and sometimes you can't. Now, when you're talking about increasing your SKU count, let's say your product is like a sweatshirt or something, a smart sweatshirt, I don't know. Every color, every size, that counts as a different SKU. So if you just had, let's say, for instance, a power bank, and it comes in one color, one size, you only have one SKU. The more SKUs you have, the more complexity that you're adding overall. So I've seen some campaigns where, you know, they only have 3 SKUs and it'd be a very simple project, but they run with the perks at the higher levels where you'll get a shirt or you'll get your water bottle engraved with your name. If you had 1,000 water bottles and they're all the same color, it's one SKU. But if you engrave 100 of them personally, now you've added 100 extra SKUs. People in warehouses,
stay away from engraving.
Exactly. Yeah. Don't engrave anything. That's the main point here.
Don't customize individual units.
Yeah. But when you're looking at like people that work in the warehouse, you know, people make mistakes. Mistakes happen. And if you accidentally send out your engraved water bottle to the wrong person, it's going to be very hard to replace that, you know, custom SKU with another one. Same with apparel. You send out the wrong size, and it might just be the perk too. And now you've increased complexity and added mistakes. Right. Batteries, you know, sometimes you can't help this if your product requires batteries. If you can, shipping it, you know, without the battery is often a good idea. You know, potentially using some sort of battery that could easily be picked up in a storefront or something. That's one way to get around it.
The best class, if your product must ship with a battery, the best classification is PI 967. And that's basically battery installed within the product. So you want to definitely, if you must include a battery with your product, make sure that it's installed. And I got a ton of these stories. I helped another campaign. They had a gimbal, a camera stabilizer unit, and very, very nice product. However, and the product came with a battery, but the battery wasn't installed inside the unit. It was actually in the packaging. And because of that, and we were shipping it from I can't recall what hub we were shipping out of, but it really restricted the carriers that we had available, and those carriers that were available were extremely costly, and they also had limitations. So what we end up having to do is we have to actually run a project and open up every single unit, install the battery inside the unit, close up the unit, put a note in there that, hey, your unit's been opened, because we have to, install the battery inside the product. So obviously that added cost, that added time, and so just if again go back, and I'm going to keep repeating this battery thing, but because a lot of products now do have batteries in it, it's one of those things that you definitely want to really take a good look into when you're considering your campaign.
So I think this will be everyone's favorite slide, probably. This is the general estimate of costs. This is also probably in some ways the hardest slide to discuss, or in some ways, not misleading, but definitely you want to make sure that
it doesn't give a full picture.
It doesn't give a full picture, for sure. Just looking at some of these things, I think it's more important to talk about how we consider these costs. So they're considered all-in costs, including what your freight might be. Like, these are the costs that you would probably want to request from your backers, depending on the size of your product, looking at like a various way of the do-it-yourself method or the 3PL method, dimensional weight, final mile delivery. So we considered these ranges with a different country mix: 20% EU, 20% rest of the world, 10% Australia, 10% Canada, the rest of the orders going to the US. The ranges consider allowance for hazmat, but like Reza was mentioning earlier, depending what carrier you use and where it's going, you can have surcharges of up to $75. So that's why you'll notice there's a plus on the end of all these numbers here, because
and obviously certain countries like South America is more expensive to ship to. Certain countries in the Middle East are more expensive to ship to. So that is by no means is a full picture, but it's kind of is a guideline. And again, something to start thinking about it. But there are other costs involved. And as you can see, we have international shipping and parcel shipping, and that kind of ties into the that we have. Our solution involves using our China facility to receive all the products, and we use that facility to assemble all the orders. Now, what we do is for the U.S. orders, we assemble them in China and we label them in China, but we use a U.S. carrier label in China, and we set aside the U.S. orders and ship it by bulk by the way of ocean to the U.S. And in the U.S. we hand it off to the carrier. So basically, we're taking advantage of Chinese labor to assemble the orders, but we're still shipping it using a U.S. carrier and basically reducing costs by shipping locally. The international shipping prices are based on shipping the rest of the world orders directly from China to that country. So for the U.S. orders, our customers, campaigners are responsible for importing the products into the U.S. You have to pay duties and taxes to get the products into the U.S., but you're reducing your last mile shipping cost. For the international orders, they're shipped, delivered, duties unpaid, which basically means that your backers have to pay duties and taxes once they receive their order. So, and again, that goes back to our earlier conversation regarding the retail value of the product, the shipping costs, and how you need to communicate with your backer that there's going to be duties and taxes, etc.
And then something we like recommending to people to do too is to always make sure that you go out and you get your own quotes. You have a variety of quotes. Go to FedEx, go to DHL.com, Hong Kong Post. Put in the dimensions of your package and the weight, and generate a lot of different quotes. Something that we touched on earlier but didn't get too in depth was, if you use like a 3PL service with volume, like 10,000 units, you get discounts on those rates. So the rates that you'll get just with like a one-off estimate from FedEx will be higher than what you would pay traditionally with someone like us. So that can also help you factor in some of those costs. Just when you're considering what you're going to ask from your backers, make sure you ask for a higher amount. It's always better to ask them for $20 to ship, and then you find out yourself that it only costs 16 or 15. You know, that's extra money for you to
offset some of the other costs. Perhaps,
exactly.
Yeah. So as far as the transportation piece of it, you know, what the things you want to consider, there's a cost to get your products into the facility, into your 3PL partner. Some manufacturers cover those costs. Some manufacturers, you know, they don't cover those costs. So that's definitely part of the conversation you want to have with your manufacturer. There's different methods of shipping products. If you want to, you know, we typically recommend going the ground route, which is it has a little bit longer delivery window, but you know it really makes sense for you know, crowdfunding campaigns. We do some consolidation, so. You know, that's one of the services that we offer. We do some consolidation, especially for U.S. orders. And as far as the different postal carriers, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, like for example, Hong Kong Post. You know, it has its restrictions. It's not an insurable carrier, but it's a really low-cost carrier versus DHL or FedEx, more of a premium service, but they're insured. They're all good services. It really depends on what your needs are, but those are the things to consider, and then based on what you want to do, that really determines what the costs are going to be. So again, this is a running theme of this whole presentation. Start planning early. Be prepared for worst case scenarios, and going back to what we were talking about earlier, you want to look into. Hey, do you want to really open your campaign? Do you really want to open your campaign to everyone? You know, it is going to become challenging when you decide that you want to open your campaign to the entire globe, and you want to consider all the things. If you want to do that, and that's fine. If you want to open up your campaign to the entire globe, but then you want to look into, okay, what are the restrictions that my product may have? What are some of the duties and taxes implications that might be applied to my product, and also what is the shipping cost? Like if you want to open up your campaign to South America, it's very expensive to, you know, it could be like 50% more expensive to ship to South America than it would be to ship to, for example, Canada. So, you know, you want to consider all of those things before you open up your campaign worldwide. And I guess, exactly. And that as well, like Russia, again, we're seeing a lot of issues with shipping to Russia. So, for example, if you want to open up your campaign to Russia, you know, you want to consider that, you know, that there's going to be a lot of customer support that you have to do at the end, just to support people that haven't received their packages.
No offense if anyone out there is from Russia, but
yeah. I mean, this is just basically that's basically been our experience. So as far as, you know, considerations you have to do for your international orders, there is duties and taxes and tariffs and customs declaration costs, and then package loss risk, and also regulation. So those are the 5 main points that you want to consider when you're looking at your international orders and what markets you open up your campaign to.
And this is something you should get in touch with an expert at some point too. Like, you know, we always recommend getting in touch with a customs broker, because there's only so much that, you know, 3PLs are able to guide you in a certain direction on some of these costs. So it's always best to make sure you get in touch with a customs broker for information like this.
And kind of tying this off, when orders are being shipped internationally, your backers are responsible to cover customs and duties that are applicable in their country, and value-added taxes that are country and region specific. and those costs are calculated based on product type, retail value of the product, and the shipping cost, and it's a percentage of the retail value and the shipping cost combined. The retail value that we put on the international preparation, the international form is called a commercial invoice, is based on the retail value that you provide us. And I have had people ask if we can mark order as a gift. Unfortunately, we can't do that. It's very different when you go to the post office yourself and you want to ship a single package and you mark something as a gift versus if you're shipping thousands of packages, you have to declare a cost for the product, and the cost has to be realistic. Like for example, if you're let's say if you shipping is, and on the commercial invoice form you say that the value of the cell phone is $1, it's going to hit the customs at a country, and if customs opens it and it says, okay, there's no way that this product is $1, then all the orders are going to get stuck in customs, and they go through a review process. It's going to get stuck. It's going to accrue storage costs, and then you're just basically opening a can of worms. So the retail value should be realistic. Obviously, since you're running a crowdfunding campaign, you have different pricing levels for the different campaigners depending on different backers, depending on when they signed on. So you have some flexibility there, but you just want to be very clear with your backers that there's going to be duties and taxes, so they're not caught off guard, and that really helps you have less refusals on the back end as well, when people are not refusing your packages, and then you have a whole bunch of other things that you have to consider: cost of processing refusals, maybe duties and taxes to get back the orders back to another country. So you really want to be crystal clear. And if you look at people that have done several campaigns, you notice in their shipping terms, they really sold this out really well, and that really, I guarantee, it comes from experience.
Yeah, so I mean, you've seen all these before. These are some of them, but on an international scale, they can be different. Dimensional weight, that issue becomes, multiplied over a certain number of orders when you're shipping internationally. Your number of orders, so let's say you're doing the mixed method where you're, shipping some orders yourself, but you're giving a 3PL. Your international orders, let's say there's only like 500 or 600, you're not going to enjoy the same like discount levels that you would, across like 3,000 to 5,000 shipments. Hazmat batteries issues, ocean freight versus air. That's something that we haven't really mentioned yet, but ocean freight is something that most people end up using ocean freight because it's like 10 times less expensive than air, but it's also much slower. I think it's 3 to 4 weeks most times that you need to consider that your product will be on the ocean using ocean freight. Last mile delivery to residents, refusals and returns, which Rez has been getting more in depth on. So some of the risks, what can go wrong? Tracking number not working. So especially in the case of ocean freight, if whether they're using a solution like we use, where the FedEx label or something like that, let's say, is printed in China and then it's put on an ocean freight container to be handed off in the US. The tracking number will be generated once the label is printed in China, but the tracking number will not go live until it's handed off to the FedEx center in the US. So they're going to have a tracking number that doesn't work for about 3 weeks. And sometimes that needs to be communicated, or you're just going to be fielding a bunch of questions about tracking number not working. Stuck in customs, return costs and related customer support, about those tracking numbers, about why the product is stuck in customs, because you said it was only $1 when it's a, $300 pair of headphones. Territories of challenging shipping infrastructure, South America, parts of Asia. Package loss, damage, theft, that unfortunately happens too at various stages of this in some of the countries we were mentioning earlier.
And I don't know if I would call this what could go wrong. I would say that what will happen. There's going to be, orders get shipped, tracking number is not working. For example, you log into the carrier's website, the tracking number doesn't work. Orders get stuck in custom. I mean, so these are things that it's not necessarily going wrong. That's just part of fulfillment. And I guess one of the reasons why we want to bring this up here is that if you do have tens and thousands of orders, then you want to consider maybe a customer having staff or resources available that can field these types of requests that are coming in and be prepared for it, so that you can respond to your backers in a timely manner and have satisfactory answers for them. So be prepared that these are the things that will happen when you're shipping, and the more orders you're shipping, the more of these you're going to have. So you definitely want to plan for this piece as well. Personal checklist. You obviously want to look at your short-term, long-term goals. Do you just want to do a campaign? Do you want to do a campaign and take your product global afterwards? Or is this a product or a business? So all of those affect how you look at your fulfillment. How many SKUs you carry, how many you manufacture. If you manufacture 20,000 units of a particular product, and you're thinking you're going to sell 1,000 through a crowdfunding campaign, and then the other 19,000 you want to store somewhere to sell over a period of 2 years. Well, one of the things you want to consider, if that's the route you're taking, and maybe you're ordering 20,000 units of a product because you want to bring the manufacturing costs down, economies of scale. You also want to consider on the back end of it that if it's going to take you 2 years to sell these remaining 19,000 units, it has to get stored somewhere, and then you're eating storage costs, and that's going to eat into your margin. So you want to really look at what are your goals. Is this just going to be a one-time product that you're going to ship out, or are you going to have a business afterward? And then you want to look at, again, what markets you're going to open yourself up to, and that opens up with a whole bunch of legal consideration, payment options, supply chain, shipping and supply chain, refund strategy, and also coming up with ways that you can have a competitive advantage. So a lot of things to consider, depending on what your goal is with your campaign, and short term and also long term if you're going to make a business out of it. There are different models for short-term one-time product fulfillment versus an ongoing business. So those are things to consider. And we're more than happy to, if that's something you want to talk with us, Andrew and I are more than happy to set up individual conversations with whoever wants to talk more into that.
So I want to get into life after crowdfunding for a couple slides here. So, there's a difference between backorder fulfillment and ongoing fulfillment. Backorder fulfillment, you basically, you run your campaign, you get, 5,000, 10,000 backers, and then you place a bulk order with the manufacturer, and you're saving costs on manufacturing at scale. You're saving costs on fulfillment at scale. Now, sometimes, people are actually launching companies off of these crowdfunding campaigns, which is awesome. But ongoing fulfillment is completely different. You have to keep, inventory of stock. But now you're considering that storage costs are going to be much higher. You have to have a way to manage your stock, whether you're using a 3PL. This is going to be much harder to do out of your garage, like we were talking about earlier. Packaging and dimensional weight and all these things become even more important. So like we were saying, your crowdfunding campaign may surprise you that you actually get enough money to launch a company. And I think this would be good for you to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we're seeing on the screen here is one of our very successful campaign. These guys got
Hi, Reza will be right back.
Sorry, guys. We got cut off. Awesome. Yeah, so Be Inventive ran a very successful campaign. Their product is bulky, so how we help them is we put them in a whole bunch of different hubs to get the product stage closer to their end customer. And then working with them, and then they basically grew this into a business. And as they're expanding their business, one of the things that they're doing is they're reducing their footprint, maybe reducing how many hubs they're going to be into, because carrying inventory carrying costs in more and more regions, it becomes cost prohibitive. So it's a great story of someone that had a very successful campaign and had a really good strategy for fulfilling their back orders, and then had to do a shift of strategy for the ongoing fulfillment just to remain competitive. And I think for them particularly, it involved reducing the SKU count, as far as how big their product catalog is, reducing their footprint of how many facilities, how many regions they sold into, and basically really just honing in on their core products and also what their core regions that they were very successful in. I think we're coming towards the end of our presentation. I want to leave some time for the Q&A. Nishta, Joan, I want to leave it open for you guys so you can ask questions.
Absolutely. Thank you, Reza and Andrew, for such a great presentation. I know it was packed with information, so we really appreciate it. If you have any questions, I know we have time for a couple, so please submit them in the chat box. Maybe to start, Andrew and Reza, if you can talk a little bit about how you work with campaigners, what the process is like, and if folks do want to have kind of more of a one-on-one conversation with you directly, what that would look like.
Yeah, so the traditional flow here is there's a landing page that people put their information on. I'm actually normally the first person to reach out, touch base by email, phone call, and get an idea of like where you're at in your campaign, whether you are planning on going live or you're at the point where you need to ship, then Reza over here, runs the proposals, and then together we've been running people through the warehouse process of actually shipping their product to the end customer. As you can see on the screen, there are some benefits going through the landing page. Does open you up to being in consideration for flash funding, the one-on-one consultation. So if you're pre-campaign, you end up talking to me and I can run you through a lot of the bullet points that we've been covering today. You all will be able to use the consolidated bulk shipment option out of Shenzhen, like we've been mentioning, and we have negotiated shipping discounts specifically for Indiegogo campaigners.
Great, thank you.
I see a couple of questions here. Do you want, Nisha, do you want to read the questions, or should I just go through them?
You can just work down the list. That'll be easiest. If there are any that I can help answer, I'm happy to help.
Sure. Again, and if I don't read your question, it's just because it's probably a lot lengthier conversation. So that please reach out to us so we can have that conversation. So if we didn't read your question, that just means that we probably need to have a more limited conversation. So one of them is how do you limit your campaign to exclude some countries? Do you state these countries please do not join? Nisha, maybe you might want to touch on that, because it's more of an Indiegogo thing as far as how you can limit your campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you're creating and editing your Indiegogo campaign, when you're actually creating the perks that you're going to be shipping out to your backers, that is the section in which you can actually limit where those perks are going to go. So campaigners have used that section in a variety of different ways. You know, for most campaigners, that perks section is really where they're distinguishing between their SKUs. So if you have a particular SKU, for example, that you don't want to send to a specific country, for that particular perk, you can restrict whatever countries or regions you want to, and it's absolutely perk specific. So if one of your perks is going to go global and one of them is only going to get shipped to the US, that's 100% possible.
Great, thanks, Nisha.
So I found a cool question about, you know, people manufacture in other places other than China. I saw someone ask a question about like Vietnam or Singapore. So like with us, with what Ingram did, we, you know, strategically selected the Shenzhen area because China is a manufacturing hub. But this just goes back to some of the costs that we were talking about earlier. You know, maybe you do save a lot of money by manufacturing in Vietnam. A lot of the warehouses that do the type of shipping that we do will be located in China. You are going to have to freight your product in bulk, like to China in that scenario, or find some sort of provider that's, you know, offering a similar service in Vietnam if you're trying to save money on the freight. But in most instances, you know, if you want to manufacture in Vietnam, now you just need to consider you're going to have to freight it, you know, somewhere else, either the US or somewhere in China.
Another good question is that regarding when you import products from China, what we need to do in terms of tax and tariff, who should you contact? You need to contact a customs broker. The customs broker, so there's a couple of things that a customs broker can do for you. Customs broker can not only help you bring your products into the country, but they can also help you with your tariff code determination. There's every product has its own unique tariff code. It's called an HS code, harmonized system, HTS code, harmonized tariff system code. So you want to reach out to a customs broker in the region, like if you want to import into the US. You want to talk to a U.S. customs broker, we can certainly make some recommendations for you as well. So, you know, that will be the title of the person that you want to talk to, a customs broker. The another question was regarding signature required. Yeah, signature required. Well, so for the international shipments, basically, when we ship something internationally, the backer cannot get the order until they pay duties and taxes. So some countries, they get an email and basically they have to go to the post office to pay the duties and taxes so they can get the product picked up, or they get a note on the door. It depends on from carrier to carrier, country to country. In the US, you know, if you require signature required, it's obviously adds more cost too. And, you know, so that's one of the things to consider is it's an added cost.
I see one about international returns. That's a good question because we just kind of mentioned that you have to consider returns, but let's say you're using a carrier such as Hong Kong Post and you're shipping out of our Shenzhen warehouse to the EU or someone else. If you actually have a return, the point of origin for the shipment is where the return goes back to. So if it goes into the EU and it gets through customs and then it's refused, it will come back through customs, sent back to China. So, you know, that's another cost too, because now the customer, you know, doesn't have the product, they don't want to pay for it, but you've shipped it 2 ways and gone through customs swaps.
There's a question about software that you can use. I mean, if you want to generate labels, you know, there's a platform called ShipStation. You can use something like that to generate labels for yourself. If you want to do if you want to do it yourself, like a DIY project. We have a question about chocolate and food and shipping refrigerated. You know, unfortunately, we don't have a shipping refrigerated option. So you definitely want to talk to someone that has climate control facilities, and if it has to be shipped with what do you call it, ice?
Dry ice.
Dry ice. You know, that obviously is costlier. I know it's a little bit costlier option.
Customs on that is different too, because food products.
A little bit different, yeah. So I mean, I don't think I've yet to come across a crowdfunding campaign with chocolates. I really don't have that much information, but I know that we don't have a cold shipping option.
If you're considering it as a stretch goal, don't do it. I would say that would be recommended.
Great question on how you can find out more about individual countries' tariffs and VATs. Go to a website like dutycalculator.com. And if you have your tariff code for your product, you should be able to get a good idea as far as what the duties and taxes are. Remember, the tariff is not only based on retail value, but retail value plus the shipping cost. So keep that in mind.
Well, I've seen a couple of questions about people manufacturing in the EU. Or if we have hubs in the EU, that is something that we are working on, trying to get hubs in various countries. The direct shipping method that we mentioned in the US does work into other countries. So we're working on expanding the network to eventually include the EU, maybe Canada.
Great question. As far as the shipping cost, is it based on shipping costs for the duties and taxes? Is it based on the shipping cost that you charge at the campaign, or the actual shipping cost? It's based on the actual shipping cost. So the duties and taxes are based on the actual shipping cost plus the retail value. How do you handle international returns? So international, again, for crowdfunding campaigns, we haven't come across returns. It's more refusals and undeliverables. Let's say if we ship with the Hong Kong Post will return back to Hong Kong, and from there we get it delivered to our facility. So that's one of the benefit of working with a postal service. If we ship with DHL, then DHL we have to pay dues and taxes to get the shipment back to the country. So I think one of the main things you want to do, and one of the reasons why we're doing these campaigns, is to reduce the number of refusals and returns that you have by considering and being clear to your backer, so you don't get these refusals. As far as actual returns, if somebody got their product and they don't like it, right now with crowdfunding campaigners, because it's a limited agreement, it's on a project by project basis. For returns, we basically ask that if a campaigner wants to allow somebody to return a product because they didn't like it, so for them to ship it to the campaigner directly.
So I know we're coming up on 11 o'clock. Nisha, was there anything else on Indiegogo's side you guys want to cover before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I appreciate you really just barreled through a whole ton of questions there. I know there are a couple others kind of coming in right now. Unfortunately, we do have to end our webinar right at the hour. But do know, if you have other questions for Andrew or Reza, you can absolutely speak with them one-on-one. We'll be sending out a way to get in touch with them in our follow-up email to this webinar. You can also email shipping@indiegogo.com, and we'll do our best to address any questions via email. And finally, this entire webinar is covered very nicely and concisely in a shipping and fulfillment guide that has a lot of the same information that was presented by Andrew and Reza today. That link will also be available from our follow-up email as well. So sorry again for folks whose questions we didn't get to. Definitely speak with Andrew and Reza one-on-one. And with that, I want to thank Andrew and Reza for their time, and thanks all of you for joining us today.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Bye.